Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. As you may have seen a few days ago on launch day, I purchased the Oculus Quest 2. At the time, I had done a quick unboxing and then first impressions video. It's now been a few days. I've been trying it out with a couple different sims and just testing different things out with the link and everything, comparing it to my Rift CV1. So I thought it's a good time to do my final-ish review of the headset. I say it that way because there are still updates to come from Oculus in regards to the link and what it's capable of. So basically right now, as you get it, today being October 18th, is when using it over link, which you mostly will be doing for sim racing, you're basically still stuck to the Quest 1's resolution and refresh rates or frames per second. So there is updates coming to unlock the 90 frames per second and the higher resolutions of the Quest 2, but they are not out yet. So I am reviewing this based on what you get out of the box today, not with any of the tweaks or different things you can do out there. You can look up videos, whether using virtual desktop or other tweaks to up the resolution. I figure a lot of people buying this aren't going to be either into or wanting to get into side loading and downloading different apps and doing manual ADB commands. So I'm doing this review based on what you get in the box, when you got it hooked up with Link, just normally as it is today. Again, that's October 18th, 2020, in case you're watching this in the future, because that updates may or may not be out at that point. So that's just to get that out of the way. My reviews based on that. I will probably do some follow-up reviews with some tweaks and different things I've tested out, and I may touch on them a little bit in this review, but this review is mostly just what you get out of the box and you get plugged in today. Also, to get out of the way, well, first of all, if you're watching this, this is basically a review based on sim racing, how this headset works for sim racing. I won't really be touching on much, if any at all, of the standalone features and other games on the headset. This is strictly based how it works for sim racing and the link cable. Also, to get out of the way right now is the Facebook integration. As I'm sure you've probably heard, read, seen in other videos, Facebook is absolutely required for the Quest 2 to be able to log in. Your old Oculus account will not work. You've got to link it to your Facebook account. And everyone's got their own opinions and feelings on Facebook and having to use Facebook to log in and all that. I'll leave that up to everyone watching this. You've got your own opinions. Just be aware that it is absolutely required to sign in. So if you are considering this headset, please keep that in mind. So moving forward here, we'll get started with a quick overview of the hardware itself before we get into the gameplay and performance in-game. Okay, so just to quickly touch on the hardware itself. Right out of the box, weight-wise, feels good. I never used the Quest 1, so I can't compare it to that. Compared to my old CV1, it's probably pretty similar. I actually haven't looked up the specs online. If anything, this might be a touch heavier, but by all accounts, quite a bit lighter than the first Quest. One thing I noticed out of the box, I touch on in my first impressions, because I had read in all the previous kind of pre-release reviews that were out there, or not read, but watched mostly, that this definitely felt like a cheaper, plasticky, more toy-like headset than the previous models. Again, I didn't use the Quest 1, but from my understanding, it had the kind of fabric-y finish that the CV one that I do have has. Well, this one has got rid of that, and it is just plastic. I would not say it feels cheap by any means. To me, it still feels like a solid premium headset. Yeah, it's plastic. It does have the fabric coming along the headband there, but it is plastic, but it doesn't feel cheap. It's not like it flexes at all when you push on it. Feels solid. Definitely does not feel like it's something that can just fall apart on you. Beyond that, just to touch on the big sticking point for a lot of people, the head strap. As you can see here with me moving, it's just a flexible elastic head strap. Coming from the CV1, which had a similar head strap design to the Quest 1, of a kind of a molded plastic rubbery head strap with a Velcro band on top. This definitely is a step down. However, like I find it's not as comfortable, and especially around the ears, depending how I've got this on, it can kind of dig into my ears a little bit. That being said, it's not so uncomfortable to make it unusable or unusable for a long period of time. I could still easily go a couple hours, no problem. Of course, head shape, size, everything will play a bit into that. But yeah, it's not that uncomfortable, though it is definitely a step down in that regard. I will be purchasing the Elite strap to upgrade that too, and I'll probably do a follow-up video on that once I get it. But again, this is functional. It holds it well to your head. Maybe if you're playing other games, moving your head around, it'll kind of move a little bit, just because the elastic straps, the flex you get in that. However, for sim racing, you're not really just jerking your head around a lot, so it works fine. Depending on head shape and everything else, maybe more uncomfortable for others, but it's definitely not too terrible. You can get by with it, no problem. The other, well, I can't speak to the Quest 1, but definitely to my CV1, the other downgrade is the audio. So if I hold this up here, you can see right in here on the head strap, those are the speakers, one on each side. Compared to the over-ear speakers found on the CV1, these are a definite downgrade. It's not a huge deal because, well, especially with this strap, it's very simple to just throw a headset on over top of it. But it is a downgrade nonetheless. With my CV1, I had those speakers on, never a problem, always sounded great. Now, all that said, is again like the head strap, these aren't super terrible to be unusable. I have started using them a little more when I've been streaming or doing other recordings, just because you can hear my voice a little easier while I talk, and it just makes that kind of stuff easier. And it is good enough that you hear the cars around you, you hear your car, all the details, like if you're using the sound based to make shifts on, for example. You can hear if cars are coming up beside you or behind you, tire squeals, all that stuff. You can hear it. It's just not the best sounding, but it's not so horrible that you can't make out those details. It is quieter. You do have to turn up the volume a bit if using that. But again, if you got a decent headset, it's worth using that. But in a pinch, you can get by with these speakers. So the other thing to touch on that I will be changing out, but it's not that it's a bad thing on here, is the facial interface, the foam padding around here. So like I said, I'll be switching it out, but that's just because personally, I just prefer the fake leather ones, especially if you're having other people use it or you're doing something where you sweat much or anything. They're much easier to clean. They don't soak up the sweat like the foam, everything else. That said, this one on here, if you don't mind the foam facial interfaces, I find way more comfortable than the original foam interface that came with my CV1. This foam is a different foam. I don't really know how to explain it. It's kind of like a more fuzzier feeling foam. And it actually is very comfortable. I've really liked using it. Again, it's just if you use with other people or you ever do anything that kind of, even just a little bit of sweat, it is foam. It is going to soak that up. The fake leather ones are just easier to quickly wipe down. They're dry. You're good to go. So that's the only reason I'm going to change that out. But if you're good with the foam, like, this is very comfortable. So I don't really dock the headset at all for that. That's just personal preference. Otherwise, touch on one of the other big things that's changed with this is the IPD. No longer an IPD slider on the headset. I will try to show this in the camera. I'm not sure how well it will pick it up. But basically you've got the lenses and there's 3 settings that you can manually move it between. Now, for me personally, I've got no issues with this. The middle setting is for a 63 IPD. Mine's a 63.5, so almost exactly. So the middle setting works out pretty much perfectly for me personally. Of course, that will differ for everyone. So there are apps, there are other things to measure your IPD, and then you can compare it to what the 3 settings on this are and kind of make a determination if it's going to work for you. Otherwise, I mean, best case scenario, though, with COVID and everything else, might be harder right now, is if you can try one of these out first before buying, just to test it. Because if you fall out of those settings, especially outside of the first and third settings, this really isn't probably going to work out for you well. There are some videos on YouTube for in between the 3 settings, showing that you can move the lenses if you do it just right to get in between the 3 presets. However, with that, it can be done, but the software isn't. So when you put it on one of the 3 presets, the software is making changes on the screen to accommodate that. Or if you're putting it in between, the software is not making those changes, and therefore it's still not going to be perfect. However, videos I have watched have said it's still better having the lenses lined up right and the software not accommodating for that. But of course, that's up to everyone else, and I can't speak to that because, again, I'm lucky where the number 2 setting's almost perfect for me. Other than that, though, with the hardware, I mean, just like the Quest 1 and the Rift S, it is inside-out tracking. You've got the cameras all on the front here. That just basically, they track everything. No need for sensors. Coming from a CV1, this is actually a giant upgrade for me. I can now get rid of my sensors. Now I've freed up, because basically with Link, I'm just using a USB-C port on the back of my computer, which was a port I never used for anything previously. So now I've freed up 3 USB 3.0 slots. I've freed up an HDMI slot, all to just use a USB-C that never got used prior to this anyways. So that's freed up a whole bunch at the back of the computer. In terms of just getting things set up, it's just wherever I am, just throw this on. Sometimes it asks you to confirm the Guardian or reset it up, which is okay, but Yeah, I mean, it just takes a minute to do. And especially with the hand tracking, you don't even need to have your controllers handy. You just kind of use your hands and select the option you want. Uh, but compared to setting up sensors and everything else, uh, that for me personally, coming from a CV1, huge upgrade. I love that fact. Uh, if you've already got a Rift S or a Quest 1, obviously that part of it's not as much of a upgrade for you because it's pretty much the same as what you already got. So, anyways, that pretty much wraps it up for the hardware itself. So let's move on. All right, so before moving on to the actual in-game performance of everything, let's talk about Oculus Link a little bit. Because if you're using this for sim racing, chances are you're going to be using the Oculus Link. There's some other things with virtual desktop and stuff that make running it wirelessly possible. However, it involves side loading, everything else. So a lot of people are just going to go with the Link when sitting at your rig with your computer there. It's really not a big deal to have the wire attached. So let's go over that first. And well, first let's just talk about the setup of it, which is super simple. As you can see, I've got it plugged into the side of the headset here in the USB port, or the USB-C port. Got the other end plugged into the USB-C port at the back of my computer. And I should mention, as you may have seen in my unboxing video, this is the official Oculus Link cable. There are cheaper options out there. You definitely pay a high premium for this one. However, I wanted to make sure, because I was planning on doing a video for this, and I haven't used Quest or Link previously, I wanted to make sure I took out basically any issues that a cheaper cable or anything else might bring up. I want to take that out of the equation when testing. So I did go with the official Oculus Link cable. There are others out there that are compatible. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. Check them out from others going through what's compatible and what's not. But again, I paid the premium just to make sure that everything worked as it should, and I didn't have to worry if it was the wire screwing anything up or anything like that. But basically, like I said, one end's plugged into the back of the computer, the other into the headset itself. Once you put this on, I would record the screen, but it doesn't show the initial part because the initial part's on the Quest itself. Basically, it'll just pop up. It'll ask you to allow permissions to data. You click deny, and then it'll ask you, do you want to start Link? You click enable, and then you're good. You get the Oculus desktop app, shows up on the screen, same as your Rift CV1 or Rift S. Works exactly the same. The hand tracking does go away once you do that. You do need to use the controllers. If you're needing to do anything in that interface, usually I'm just using the mouse click, opening the iRacing or whatever else from my desktop, then throwing the headset on. But literally that's it. You plug it in, you hit deny to allow access, and you hit deny as per, that's what Oculus says to do. I don't know why it even comes up, but you hit deny and then you hit enable Link and you're good to go. One thing I would like, Link is still in beta. Again, the updates with it coming out of beta and everything else aren't out yet, and we'll see if it changes anything then. It would be nice if you just plugged this into the computer and it just assumed you were plugging it in to use Link, or at least gave you the option to set it to that, so you didn't have to answer those questions every time you did it, and it just go in to using Link. However, at this time, you do have to do it each time. So if I were to unplug this now and plug it back in, again, I'm going to have to do the same things. It's not a huge deal. It only takes a few seconds. But still, in the future, it would be nice if they just automated that, or at least gave you an option in the settings to say, once plugged in, always enable Link. And if there is a setting for that, I haven't seen it myself, so I don't believe there is at this time. But again, Link is still in beta. Hopefully, when it comes out, something like that will get fixed. Other than that, I'll touch more on in performance, but I'm really happy with using Link on this. That's why I always held off the Quest 1. I considered getting it a few times. I'd read enough people saying it didn't work out well for sim racing that I always held off. But again, once we get into the performance of things, I will say Link, to me, again, personal opinion, I don't find almost any difference between using Link and using my CV1. Others report a lot more latency and artifacting and everything else. Who knows, that could be the cables they're using. That could be just, well, especially with latency, different people have different tolerances. But to me, just shifting gears, I just don't notice any latency. Obviously, there's some latency there. I just don't notice any difference from this on Link to my CV1. But again, your tolerances to that stuff may be different. But I've been running laps. Hasn't affected my lap times at all. So it's not enough latency that's affecting me in that way. So yeah, I'm happy with Link. I'm happy with its performance. Again, there are wireless options, though when you're sitting in your rig like this, having a wire is really not that big of a deal. So let's move on and talk about the actual in-game performance. Alright, so now onto the performance of the Quest 2 in-game. I've tested this out with the 3 main sims I'm currently playing. The one I play probably 90% of the time is iRacing. Then Assetto Corsa Competizione, along with Race Room, which I used to play a lot. Not so much lately, but I have been trying to get back into it. So, just right off the bat, as soon as I had this plugged in and ready to go, for me, coming from using the Rift CV1, this was a giant step up. The screen door effect was minimal compared to the CV1. It's still there. You can see it, but realistically, in gameplay, it's not something you notice anymore. Whereas the CV1, it's just always there. This is just way, way better. And then in the individual games themselves, again, I mean, performance, kind of differs from game to game. Race Room and iRacing, superb. And the settings I've got it to is to make sure I'm getting the full 72 frames a second. That's what I did with my CV1 generally, was always aimed to get that 90 frames. Except for ACC, with my CV1 and now this, that game's just, the VR performance is just so terrible in that. I always relied on ASW to play it at 45 frames per second. The only way to get it up to 90 for me, and I should mention my computer is a Ryzen 5 3600 with a RTX 2070. And with ACC, the only way I could ever get 90 frames was just have everything turned down to the lowest. And the game just looked terrible. Shadows looked terrible, which normally I turn those down anyways, but I at least want some shadows so the cars don't look like they're floating. So in that game, really, I always relied on ASW. I bring that up because with this, without the updates out, the max 72 frames per second, ASW is knocking you down to about 35, 36 frames per second. And with the CV1 at 45 frames, I know some people hate it. I didn't mind it that much. Yeah, it wasn't ideal, but it didn't completely ruin the experience for me. With this, it does. Going down that low to 35, 36 frames a second, it's just not a good experience. So right now, ACC with this is not a good option. Again, there are tweaks out there to get the 90 frames per second. And there are updates, official updates coming that are going to allow that. So once that comes, ASW will again be at 45 frames a second on this headset, and that shouldn't be an issue. But as of today, really I don't enjoy playing ACC with this. The other sims, like I said, iRacing, Race Room, no issues. Easily get the 72 frames a second. Didn't really have to adjust VR settings really that much in general, even with the higher resolution. But of course, that's aiming for less FPS than the CV1. But they run rock solid, look great. Clarity, again, it's hard to show on a computer monitor. But like just even the dashboard is just so much more clear. You can easily see what everything is on the digital dashboards, where I couldn't always do that in the CV1. Being able to see up in the distance, definitely more clear. One thing with the CV1 was brake lights. It was always kind of tough to see brake lights unless you were within a certain distance of the car. Now that's no longer an issue with this. So I have done a couple videos just to compare how I can with between the Quest 2 and the CV1. I did borrow this technique or this way of doing it from Gamer Muscle, so please check out his channel. But I'll quickly jump into these videos. They somewhat show you the difference between the clarity of the Quest 2 and the CV1. Alright, so I'm going to borrow a page out of Gamer Muscle's playbook here, which I saw him do a while back, as recording straight VR footage doesn't really show the difference in clarity in any way, because what you're seeing is what is capturing off my computer screen, which obviously is much clearer than VR. So like I saw Gamer Muscle do previously, I'm going to line up on this 100 marker here at Imola, coming up to the turn, and I'm going to reverse back until I can no longer clearly read that. As you can see right now, this is in the Oculus CV1, and this will somewhat give us a reading on the clarity difference between the two, because I'm not really sure what else the best way to show that difference or capture that difference on a video is. But as you can see, when we're reversing back, I can still make out the 100, though now at this point it is quite a blurry mess for me. If I take a look at the screen, you can still somewhat see that's a 100. Definitely clearer than I see in the headset. I still can kind of make it out, mostly because I know that's a 100. But like now I can basically see that it's a line and two blobs of black where the zeros are. I can't make out the outline of the zeros. I can't see the white spot in the middle. So I'd say that's pretty fair right about there, being where it's just blurry, which actually brings us almost right past the 200 that you can see there. So that's with the CV1. Now I'm going to switch over to the Quest 2 and let's compare how far back we can go in that one. Alright, so we're back here now in the Quest 2. Again, at the 100 marker, I'm just going to start reversing back. Again, this whole idea of using these markers to check it out is from Gamer Muscle, so please check out his video. But yeah, so reversing back, at this point I can still clearly make out those zeros. I can clearly make out the white spots in between, so... Well, it is starting to get a little blurrier at this point. I can still clearly make out the white spots in between. I can still make out the little notch at the top of the one. Now you can see we're passing by the 200. So it is now, I'd say, starting to match where the CV1 got to in terms of blurriness. I can still make it, I can still make it out a little bit better. Okay, right about there is now where I can tell it's a 100, but I can't really make out the white center parts of the zeros. So, as you can see, I'd say about now is equal to what I could make out on the CV1. And as you can tell, we're quite a bit past the 200 marker now. So it does have that bit of extra length that you can see forward compared to the CV1. But then in general, far less screen door effect. The dashboard, I mean the CV1, I can make out all the things on the dashboard here somewhat, but I do sometimes kind of have to lean forward a bit to get a clearer look at what exactly is what. With this, I can clearly make out everything there. So yeah, that's my comparison on the clarity of it. And as you can see, definitely make it further back. On the screen, when I compare, actually that 100 sign looks a lot further away on the screen than it does in the field of view of the Oculus. So so there you can see the improvements compared to the CV1. Alright, so as you could see there, you can definitely, things are definitely more clear through this. Really, even that comparison doesn't do it justice. It doesn't seem like a whole lot when you're watching that, but in reality, in actual using the headset and comparing it to the CV1, definitely a huge step up. And again, this is, as of today, October 18th. There are more updates coming to unlock the higher refresh rate along with the higher resolution. So all of that is, you know, theoretically just going to get better. But again, I can't speak to that because those updates aren't out yet. But that pretty much does it for the performance. Like I touched on with the link, I mean, latency and stuff, I just don't notice any difference. Some people are much more sensitive to that, so they may, but in an actual race, I don't notice any difference. I don't notice any delay. Like, I use the gear shifts as an example because they're the easiest to kind of, you know, when you click it and then see it change in game. It seems pretty instant to me. Like no worse than the CV1. Not that I can tell anyways. So the frames per second, again, it's still locked at 72. FPS is another thing that's kind of different for different people. You have different sensitivities to it. For me, the 72 is fine. It feels smooth. Yeah, 90 feels smoother, but to me, 72 is perfectly playable. For other people, that might not be the case. I know some people definitely have more sensitivity to noticing the slower frame rates. For me, not an issue. It's only an issue, like I said, in a title that you need to use ASW for, because ASW with this is just not it's too low. But yeah, so performance wise for me, I'm enjoying this. Um, and not much else to say about it really. It all works. It's all a step up from my CV1, so I'm happy with the performance. And now just my final thoughts. All right, so all that's really left is my final thoughts on the Oculus Quest 2. And what many of you are probably wondering and why you're watching this, is it worth getting? And is it worth upgrading to? Really, the answer to that is dependent on what your setup currently is. I would say if you are like me, still a user of the first generation headsets like the CV1 or even the Vive, yes, I would say this is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. The resolution is just much, much better, even though it might not be the best out there, but much better than the Generation 1. You get rid of all the sensors and all the extra plugs. You got one USB-C to plug in, or depending on your situation, you could get away with virtual desktop and have nothing to plug in. And then beyond that, it's just a better overall headset than the CV1. If you are someone new to VR, you're just looking to get into it, again, I think this is one of the best options out there. For the price, it's the cheapest one out there. Best way to get in. It's works very well. If price isn't an issue, you could go with some of the more higher end dedicated PC VR setups. But at the same time, if you're just getting in VR, you might be into all the other VR type games, not just sim racing. And having this be standalone is very handy for that. So great option for getting into it. Now, obviously, if you have something higher end like the Index or the if you have a pre-order for something like the Reverb G2 that's coming out, those are better. No getting around that. Those will definitely be better experience in VR. Obviously, those come with the hefty price tags. The G2 is going to be twice as much as the Quest. The Index is, last I checked in Canada on Steam, is selling for 1,300 and something. That comes with the lighthouses and all that. So definitely, they're not even in the same ballpark price wise. So comparing the two just aren't they? If that's the kind of money you're looking to spend, those are just the better experiences, bar none. Where it gets questionable is if you have the Quest 1 or you have the Rift S. Quest 1, I believe once the updates actually come out for the Quest 2 to allow you with Link to use the 90 hertz along with the higher resolution, I definitely think this probably is a worthwhile upgrade. But as I've said multiple times, those aren't out yet. So really, if you're looking at just sim racing through the Link, there's no reason to upgrade. You might as well wait until those updates are out. You can see people's impressions of those updates. Make sure they're actually paying off as we all hope they will. They're not out yet. There's always the chance they just get delayed or don't actually work out the way everyone thinks it's going to. You just never know. So considering that right now the Quest 2 is going to give you the same things that you get with the Quest 1, you just might as well wait. You don't need to rush out there and get it. The Rift S I've never used. In other people's videos that have more experience with other headsets have compared the Quest 2 quality to the Rift S. Again, you'll probably get a slightly better experience with the Rift S as it is a higher refresh rate at the moment. Price wise, they're fairly similar, though of course that all might change once these updates come out. So I wouldn't run out to get one of these right now if you happen to have a Rift S. But once the updates come out, this could potentially overtake the Rift S. We'll have to wait and see on that. And if you're a new buyer looking to buy Rift S or Quest 2, that's a tough decision. I mean, it depends. If it's strictly and only for sim racing, probably the Rift S is your better bet. And you're on limited time. The Rift S is going away in a few months. But even when it does, this Quest 2 is definitely up to the task. So I'll leave it at that. Not much else to say right now. I will update once the updates come out. I have been messing around with some things like virtual desktop. I may do a follow-up video on some of that. Just unfortunately, with my home setup, with my network the way it is, and where my sim rig's located, I'm pretty far from my router. So it doesn't work well if I'm sitting at my sim rig. Though I believe it is running at the native resolution of the Quest 2. Because when I fired up just to test it out, and it looks amazing. As soon as I start driving or doing anything else, the stream from my router just falls apart. But the resolution, if that is what we're looking at once they do update the link, definitely looks like a sizable bump up from even what I'm getting from this, which has already been a sizable bump up from what I'm used to with the CV1. So I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll answer what I can. And please, if you enjoy my content, like and subscribe to my channel. Every little bit's appreciated, and I will see you the next video out. Have a good one.